The night that changed the Pacific. The night of November 14th, 1942, began like so many others in the Solomons. Humid air, churning black water, and a sky so dark it seemed to swallow the horizon. Nothing moved on the surface except the gentle sway of waves. But beneath that calm surface, tension hung like a storm, ready to break. It was a night that would enter naval history. A night when America proved to itself and to the world that it could beat the Imperial Japanese Navy at what had once been Japan's most feared advantage, night combat. And the man who made that victory possible was Rear Admiral Willis A. Lee. A Navy still haunted by failure. In the months before this battle, the U.S. Navy had been rocked by humiliating defeats. Savo Island, where multiple cruisers were sunk within minutes. Cape Esperance, a chaotic wind nearly ruined by friendly fire. The November 13th night action, where American losses were catastrophic. Nothing had gone smoothly. Nothing had come easily. Japan dominated the night. To American sailors, nighttime meant fear. Japanese ships maneuvered like ghosts. Their Type 93 long-lance torpedoes seemed to appear from nowhere. Their gunners hit targets the Americans could barely see. But the U.S. Navy had something new. Something Japan still didn't believe in. Something that, in the right hands, would change everything. Radar. Enter Admiral Willis Lee, the man who could see in the dark. Rear Admiral Willis Augustus Lee was not a typical officer. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flamboyant, he wasn't political. But he understood something no other admiral fully grasped. Night battles were no longer about eyesight. They were about electronics. Lee had spent years studying radar. He knew its limits, its quirks, and most importantly, its potential. Where other admirals saw radar as experimental, Lee saw it as a revolution. He had trained his crews to track targets entirely by radar, coordinate fire control without visual confirmation, update range data continuously, trust electronics even when instincts said otherwise, and he commanded a ship designed for the future, USS Washington, armed with 9 16-inch guns and the most advanced fire control radar in the world. Alongside her sailed USS South Dakota, another modern battleship, fast, powerful, heavily armored. Together, under Lee's command, they formed the core of a task group assigned a desperate mission: stop the Japanese battleship Kirishima from bombarding Henderson Field. If the Japanese succeeded, Henderson would be destroyed. The Marines on Guadalcanal would lose air support, and the entire campaign could collapse. Lee had to win. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight. The Japanese approach, confident and deadly Japan, sent one of its most aggressive leaders, Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo, a veteran of night engagements and a believer in decisive, overwhelming fire. Under his command sailed Battleship Kirishima, heavy cruisers, Atago and Takao, light cruiser Nagara, 11 destroyers. The plan was simple. 1. Enter Iron Bottom Sound. 2. Destroy any American surface forces. 3. Bombard Henderson Field at point-blank range. 4. Guarantee safe landing of Japanese reinforcements. Japan believed the Americans were staggering, outnumbered, and unable to stop them. They expected victory. What they got instead was Willis Lee. Because first contact, Washington's radar sees them all. At exactly 01 Cool, Washington's SG surface search radar lit up with contacts. Lee stood calmly behind the radar operators as glowing blips appeared across the screen, each representing a Japanese ship slicing through the night. Washington tracked Kirishima, Takao, Atago, Nagara, and multiple destroyers. Range 18,000 yards. Heading toward Henderson Field. Speed increasing. Lee now knew everything. His enemy knew nothing. Kondo did not realize an American battleship was less than 10 miles away. He believed the U.S. had only destroyers in the area. He didn't know he was being watched through the darkness. Lee turned to his captain, Glenn Davis, and said quietly, "We'll take them now." A battleship, hiding in plain sight, Japan had powerful searchlights. They had elite lookouts with exceptional night vision. They had optical rangefinders that were the envy of the world. But none of that mattered. The night was pitch black. Kondo's ships could see absolutely nothing. Washington, on the other hand, saw everything. Lee kept his ship hidden. No searchlights, no gun flashes, no radio chatter. Minimal wake. Washington was a steel giant, moving silently through the night like a predator closing in on prey. South Dakota. The unfortunate target. South Dakota, however, was not as lucky. Electrical failures suddenly crippled her systems. Communications went out. Fire control radar blinked offline. Half her circuits failed. Gun turrets momentarily froze. She became a glowing target when Japanese spotlights pierced the darkness and illuminated her silhouette. Every Japanese ship immediately opened fire. South Dakota was hit repeatedly by 14-inch shells, 8-inch shells, 6-inch shells, and hundreds of smaller rounds. Her superstructure lit up like a burning tower, but Lee did not panic. He did not change course. He did not move Washington to shield her. He did the opposite. Lee waited. He waited until every Japanese ship had turned away from him and focused all their guns on the wrong battleship. Now Kirishima was broadside on, distracted, exposed, exactly where Lee wanted her. The night America outshot the Japanese Navy. The Washington prepares to fire. In the nerve center of USS Washington, the Combat Information Center buzzed with controlled intensity. Radar operators updated range and bearing every few seconds. Fire controlmen fed the data into the Mark 8 Rangekeeper, a mechanical computer capable of calculating ballistic solutions faster and more accurately than any human eye. The numbers began lining up. Range to Kirishima, 8,400 yards. Target bearing, 330 degrees. Speed, 20 knots. Angle on bow, port 20 degrees. Lee did not shout. He did not bark orders. He simply said, "Open fire when ready." At that moment, Washington became the deadliest machine on the ocean. It's the first American salvo. Silence breaks. At 1:24, after nearly half an hour of silent tracking, 9 16-inch guns roared as one. The shockwave rolled across the deck. Flames belched from the barrels. The battleship trembled from the force of her own wrath. Japanese lookouts aboard Kirishima had only seconds to register the horror. Giant muzzle flashes, portside, battleship. It was the first moment Japan even realized Washington existed. And by then, it was already too late. The shells took less than 20 seconds to cross the distance. 6 projectiles slammed into Kirishima in the first minute alone. The night sky lights up with fire. Ordinary battleship shells punched holes. Washington's shells crushed steel like paper. They ripped open Kirishima's armored deck. They smashed through boiler rooms. They detonated deep inside the ship, turning compartments into torn metal tombs. One shell struck the steering gear, jamming the rudder. Another hit the forward turret, killing every gunner inside. A third tore into the port engine room, sending high-pressure steam blasting through the corridors. Kirishima began to circle helplessly, a battleship spinning like a wounded animal. Her crew tried desperately to regain control, but Washington had already fired a second salvo, and then a third, and then a fourth. But the Japanese command collapses into chaos. Vice Admiral Kondo could not believe what he was seeing. An American battleship, silent until the moment she fired, was annihilating his flagship force. He demanded bearings, range estimates, target identifications. But his ships had no radar. All they saw were blinding flashes in the night, towering water plumes around their hulls, and burning wreckage where Kirishima once sailed in formation. To Kondo, the battlefield was a black void punctured by explosions. To Lee, it was a perfect radar image. Washington becomes invisible again. After firing 3 salvos, Washington drifted calmly into darkness. No searchlights, no burning fuel, no exposed superstructure. South Dakota, ablaze and under fire, became the only visible target. The Japanese turned all their guns on her. Yet Lee did not maneuver to help. He knew exactly what he was doing. As Washington slipped back into the black void, Japanese gunners lost sight of her completely. They searched desperately, scanning with spotlights, firing star shells, shouting range estimates, calling commands through smoke and flame. They found nothing. Washington, through radar, still tracked all of them. Kirishama's final moments. Kirishima was dying. Her rudder was jammed completely. Her pumps were crippled. Water flooded multiple compartments. Fires spread uncontrollably. Her once powerful engines now fought against one another, causing the ship to rotate in slow, sad circles. Japanese sailors fought valiantly, sealing bulkheads, dragging hoses, carrying wounded officers, manning anti-air guns in case aircraft appeared, but every new Washington salvo tore holes deeper into the ship's core. Another American 16-inch round smashed into her number 3 turret, killing the gun crew instantly. A second hit cracked her forward barbette. A third detonation shook the aft magazines. Within minutes, Kirishima's bow was submerged. Her captain ordered the crew to prepare for scuttling. Some officers refused to leave their posts, choosing instead to go down with the ship. At 03:25, the order was given. Abandon ship. Kirishima rolled over, her guns pointing skyward like broken fingers, and slipped beneath the dark waters of Iron Bottom Sound. She became the only Japanese battleship ever sunk in a gun duel by a U.S. battleship. The Japanese retreat in panic. As Kirishima died, the rest of Kondo's force broke apart. Nagara fled at high speed. The cruisers Atago and Takao retreated north, firing wildly into the darkness. Destroyers followed in disarray, launching torpedoes with no clear targets. It was not an organized withdrawal, it was a rout. Japanese survivors later described it. We fought an enemy we could not see. Searchlights revealed nothing but smoke. We did not understand how they hit us from so far. But Willis Lee understood. He used radar the way it was meant to be used, as a weapon, not an experiment. South Dakota survives the onslaught. While Washington devastated Kirishima, South Dakota was enduring one of the most brutal punishment sessions of the war. More than 40 Japanese shells struck her. Shrapnel tore holes through her superstructure. Fires erupted everywhere. Electrical systems were nearly destroyed. Yet South Dakota's armored belt held. Not a single 14-inch shell penetrated her vital areas. She survived an attack that should have sunk her. Her crew later said, "We were hit by everything except the ocean itself." When dawn came, South Dakota limped away on her own power. Damaged, yes, but unbroken. The night America outshot the Japanese Navy, on the final American advantage, discipline. When the last of the Japanese ships disappeared into darkness, Rear Admiral Willis Lee did something very few commanders would have done. He did not pursue them. To some junior officers, it seemed like a missed opportunity. They whispered, "We should finish them. We can catch them. They're running for their lives." But Lee understood something deeper, something the Japanese had not yet realized. He had already won. If Washington charged blindly into the unknown, she could run into a torpedo ambush, a minefield, or another wave of destroyers waiting beyond radar range. Lee was too smart for that. He calmly held his position, preserving the strength of the only fully operational battleship left in the area. He was not chasing glory. He was protecting the future of the entire Guadalcanal campaign. What Japan never saw coming before this night, Japan believed 3 things about the Americans. 1. Americans could not fight at night. 2. Americans were clumsy with radar. 3. Americans relied on searchlights and visual rangefinders. All 3 beliefs were shattered in a single hour. Washington had tracked targets without lights, fired without ever seeing the enemy, repositioned flawlessly in total darkness, destroyed a battleship using radar-only fire solutions. The Japanese afterward reported, "The Americans fired without error, as if they saw through the night. They assumed Washington had some unknown superweapon." And in a way she did. She had radar, and she had Willis Lee. Hun. Kondo's report, shock and confusion. Vice Admiral Kondo wrote one of the shortest and most painful combat reports in Japanese naval history. It included lines such as, "Enemy battleship appeared suddenly. Could not determine location. Unable to hit the enemy. Kirishima disabled within minutes. Retreated to avoid further losses." For a navy that prided itself on discipline and honor, this was a humiliation. Kondo was relieved of command shortly afterward. Although he wasn't disgraced publicly, his career effectively ended that night. He had underestimated the Americans, and in warfare, underestimating an enemy is fatal. The Marines realized what happened. At dawn, Marines at Henderson Field, bleary-eyed from a night expecting bombardment, stared toward the sea. Instead of seeing burning runways or cratered positions, they saw calm ocean water and distant smoke. Word reached them around midday. The enemy battleship was sunk. Henderson Field is safe. Some Marines refused to believe it at first. How could one American battleship take on the Japanese night fighting force and win decisively? The answer traveled quickly through the ranks. Admiral Lee delivered. For the exhausted Marines, it meant one thing: they would live to fight another day. Washington emerges unscathed. While South Dakota looked like she had survived a hurricane, Washington seemed almost untouched. Her crew counted the damage. No major hits, no critical damage, no flooding, no structural compromise, radar fully functional. She had fought a full battleship duel, fired 75 rounds of 16-inch shells, and walked away without serious injury. Sailors joked, "We hit them so hard, their shells missed out of respect." But it wasn't luck. It was engineering, it was training, and above all, it was leadership. The scale of the American victory. The results of the battle were astonishing. Japan. Battleship Kirishima sunk. Destroyer Ayanami sunk. Heavy damage to Asagumo, Uranami, Teruzuki. Bombardment mission failed. Retreat forced. Reinforcements delayed. United States. Washington, no significant damage. South Dakota, heavily damaged but afloat. Henderson Field saved. Guadalcanal secured for another critical week. In a strategic sense, this single night may have prevented the collapse of the entire U.S. foothold in the South Pacific. Cast the impact on warfare. The battle radically changed naval doctrine. Before this night, many senior American officers still believed in searchlights, visual ranging, line of battle formations, close-range gun duels. After Lee's performance, the U.S. Navy rewrote its manuals. Radar was no longer an assistant. It became the primary weapon. Night battles would now revolve around radar detection, radar-based firing solutions, silent maneuvering, surprise salvos from concealed angles. Japan, by contrast, refused to adapt. They continued to rely on visual spotting, large torpedo spreads, aggressive illumination, searchlights. That stubbornness would cost them dearly. Within a year, the Japanese Navy would lose multiple night battles to radar-equipped U.S. forces who had learned directly from Lee's victory. The legend of Willis A. Lee. After the battle, Lee received a message from Admiral Halsey. "You did a great job. God bless you, Willis." It was rare praise from Halsey, a man known for fiery temper and blunt language. Lee, typically humble, responded, "We were fortunate. Washington performed as designed." But those who served under him knew better. Lee wasn't just fortunate, he was brilliant. His combination of calm judgment, supreme technical knowledge, trust in radar, disciplined command, and refusal to panic made him one of the most formidable naval commanders of the war. Some historians later wrote, Willis Lee was the first true 20th century admiral in a navy filled with 19th century thinkers. A moment of reflection. Why America Won Japan entered the war with superior night-fighting doctrine. Their destroyers were legendary. Their torpedoes were unmatched. Their crews were expert marksmen in darkness. But America had something Japan underestimated: adaptability. And this battle proved it. The U.S. Navy learned from defeat. Japan grew comfortable in victory. The result was inevitable. Should the night America outshot the Japanese Navy? The true cost of victory. The battle was over. The gunfire had faded. The searchlights had vanished. And the roar of Kiroshima's final explosions still echoed across Iron Bottom Sound. For a few minutes, the sea was eerily quiet. Then the cries began. Survivors from Japanese destroyers floated on debris, calling out into the dark, hoping their comrades would find them. American sailors listened in silence. They knew the ocean belonged to no one tonight, except those it had claimed. The U.S. Navy did not send boats to pick up Japanese survivors, not because they were cruel, but because the waters were still crawling with destroyers, torpedoes, and threats invisible in the night. War has no pause button, not even after victory. Kiroshima's grave, a symbol of a shifting war. When Kirishima sank, she became the second Japanese battleship ever lost in the war, and the only Japanese battleship sunk in a surface action against another battleship in the entire Pacific. Her crew fought bravely to keep her alive, but Washington's terrifying accuracy sealed her fate. One historian wrote, "Kirishima did not lose a battle. She lost a duel she never knew she had entered. Her wreck lies today in 3,800 feet of water, a silent monument to the night that proved the U.S. Navy had changed and Japan had not." Washington's crew understands what they did. When dawn broke and the crew of USS Washington gathered on deck, they finally saw the scale of what they had accomplished. Their ship was intact. Their guns had fired flawlessly. Their radar had found every enemy ship. Their admiral had led them with absolute calm. Crewmen whispered among themselves, "We really sank a battleship in one night. They didn't even hit us. We were invisible." The shock, the pride, and the disbelief all mixed together. But most of all, they felt something deeper: hope. And the battle's impact on the Solomons campaign. By stopping the bombardment force, Lee saved Henderson Field. With the airfield intact, U.S. planes flew at dawn. Japanese supply convoys were attacked. Reinforcement ships were forced to turn back. The Japanese ground offensive collapsed. American Marines retained air superiority. The U.S. foothold in the Solomon Islands remained secure. This one night did not win the war, but it prevented a disastrous defeat. Without it, Guadalcanal may well have fallen. And if Guadalcanal had fallen, the Pacific War could have dragged on for years longer. The Japanese Navy's reaction: shock and silence. For days after the battle, Japanese commanders refused to believe the reports. How could an American battleship appear without being seen, fire accurately without searchlights, hit every target in the dark, take out Kirishima in minutes? To Japanese naval doctrine, this was impossible. Night battles were Japan's domain. They had trained for them since the 1920s. Their optics were superior, their torpedoes unmatched. But none of that mattered against radar used correctly. One Japanese officer wrote in his memoir, "We lost to a weapon we did not understand and to an admiral who did." The radar revolution begins. After Washington's victory, the U.S. Navy made massive changes. 1. Radar became the center of combat doctrine, not an aid, not a backup. The center. 2. New night fighting units were formed. Destroyers trained extensively in radar-directed torpedo runs. 3. Battleships adopted Washington's methods. Radar-first engagements became standard. 4. Old admirals were reassigned. Younger, more technologically minded officers took charge. 5. The Mark 8 fire control radar became mandatory. Every major surface ship had to have it, and crews had to master it. The Lee Method. A new way to fight. Willis Lee didn't just win a battle, he created a template. Naval academies studied his decisions, approaching silently, using radar without searchlights, firing first, maintaining concealment, shifting position after every salvo, striking the flagship, waiting for the enemy to reveal themselves. This became the new American doctrine, and with it, the U.S. Navy would win. The battles of Kula Gulf, Kolombangara, Empress Augusta Bay, Cape St. George. Every one of those victories was a direct descendant of Washington's success. The true story of South Dakota. Even though South Dakota was hammered, her survival taught the U.S. Navy critical lessons. Her armor proved its worth. Her crew demonstrated courage under impossible pressure. Her sacrifice served as the distraction that allowed Washington to maneuver freely. Some officers later argued that South Dakota blundered. Others argued her misfortune was necessary. No, the truth, she absorbed Japan's entire attention, and because of that, Washington delivered the killing blow. War's often unfair, but her battered silhouette in the flames became a symbol of U.S. resilience. Why Washington's performance was unmatched. 3 factors explain why Washington was so unstoppable. 1. Radar superiority. No Japanese ship had anything close to the SG radar. 2. Integrated fire control system. Mark 8 radar, plus Mark 38 directors, plus mechanical computers was decades ahead of Japan. 3. Lee's unique mind. He could read radar plots like a map. He understood angles intuitively. He trusted the machine when others trusted instinct. This combination was not just rare, it was unmatched in any navy in the world at that time. A historic first and last. The battle was historic because it was the first time radar decided a major naval engagement. It was the last battleship versus battleship night duel in history. And it was the final time Japan challenged American surface forces at night with battleships. After this, Japan never again attempted a major night battleship attack. The risk was too great. The losses were too severe. The U.S. Navy had mastered the darkness. The legacy of Willis Lee. Admiral Lee continued serving with distinction until his death in 1945. He never sought fame. He never gave interviews. He never called himself a hero. But the men who served under him knew the truth. They said, if Lee says fire, we fire. If Lee says turn, we turn. If Lee says we'll win, we'll win. He was a rare figure, a technical genius, a tactical innovator, and a calm, steady commander in an era of chaos. Many historians argue that no single admiral saved Guadalcanal more directly than Willis A. Lee. Bain, the final word, why America outshot Japan that night. In the end, the battle can be summed up in one line. Japan fought with eyes. America fought with radar. Japan relied on optics, searchlights, night training. America relied on electronics, discipline, a brilliant admiral. And on that night, for the first time in the Pacific War, radar, training, and calm judgment proved stronger than tradition and experience. This was the night America outshot the Japanese Navy. This was the night technology met courage and won.